Hello, my name is Natalia Romero and this is my HIPAA case study. I chose an article from a website called Health Data Management. It is an article in a TV series that violated HIPAA. It was published April 16 of 2016. Some of today's most popular TV shows are medical TV dramas and are medical documentaries. Some of these shows are, for example, Grey's Anatomy, Dr. G Medical Examiner, Untold Stories of the ER, Mystery Diagnosis, and there are many more. A lot of the TV dramas show fictional characters and fictional stories but take place in real-life hospitals. Then you have the medical documentaries that show real-life cases. Sometimes they are reenacted and sometimes it's the actual patient living through the trauma right in front of our eyes. In order for these shows to publish these real-life cases, the patients and their family need to give consent. This is called informed consent. It's an ethical concept that the patient needs to understand and be made aware of by the hospital and the network. In a particular case, Mr. Mark Shanko from Manhattan, New York, he was brought into New York Presbyterian Hospital after he was hit by a garbage truck as he was exiting his home. He was brought in via ambulance, and this was all captured by a show that was at the time filming at New York Presbyterian Hospital. The show was called New York Med. You can actually see in this particular episode of New York Med where Mr. Shanko is brought in and he is talking to staff in regards to his condition and asking questions. All of a sudden you see his health take a turn for the worse and Mr. Shanko ends up passing away as the cameras are recording. The doctor that treated Mr. Shanko ends up coming to the camera crew and even discussing bits and pieces of Mr. Shanko's case. Now, Mr. Shanko's name was never released and his face was blurred out throughout the whole episode. Fast forward to about a year and a half later, Mr. Shanko's wife, Anita Shanko, was watching an episode of New York Med when she ends up watching the episode where her husband is actually brought into New York Presbyterian and ends up dying right before her eyes. Ms. Shanko was never made aware that New York Med had been filming there, least of all that they had filmed her husband and that they were going to air it. New York Med states that because of the fact that they blurred out Mr. Shanko's face and they never released his name, they didn't violate HIPAA. But Mrs. Shanko claims that she was able to recognize her husband just by hearing his voice, and that other people that they knew also recognized him after watching that episode. She said that she couldn't put into words what she felt watching that episode, but she basically ended up reliving one of the worst days of her life at home while watching this show. The hospital and the show tried to defend themselves by stating that their purpose is meant to educate viewers, that they were not trying to extort patients and their trauma and what they're going through. They didn't feel like they violated HIPAA since they actually blurred out his name and never gave out his blurred out his face, and never gave his name and detailed information on his case. Of course, the family felt otherwise, and they were taken to court and they were fined $2.2 billion for this. These shows continue to air today, and they continue to be viewed by many of us. We love watching them, but they just need to take precaution when it comes to real life patients, real life cases. It's something that if they're going to air, they need to abide these HIPAA laws and always request consent from patients and their families. This has been a very interesting article to read up on and do research on, and it's something that I feel that the patient, in this case Mr. Shanko and his family, Mrs. Shanko and her family, they all had all the right to sue the hospital and to be upset. I do believe this was a HIPAA violation, but others feel differently about this. This was a very, like I said, very interesting article, and I very much enjoyed doing my case study on this. Thank you.